Maisie arrived in darkness at 2 o'clock, having made good time. The flat expanse of shingled land, a promontory then reached out into western limits of the Straits of Dover, seemed to extend from the village of Fleet until one reached the sea. She thought the word windswept must have been invented for donkeylands. Positioned at the southernmost point of the Romley marshes across which gulls would haul even a good day, Nancy made her way at a low speed along a track worn by the milk tender. She thought her MG might be the only motor car that milk tender. She thought her MG might be the only motor car and had ventured down the road for a while. So quiet was the land which had ventured down the earth. For a while, so quiet was the land, with no sign of even the fisherman looking both ways as she crossed the narrow gauge lines of the Romley, Hida and Dymchurch Railway. She held Gorgina's map against a steering wheel and looked down. For a second or two she continued driving. It seemed that most of the old railway carriage homes were to the south, so she turned right past the lighthouse and maintained a crawling pace until she reached the former railway carriage that was the home of Nicholas Basington Hope. Maisie parked, pulled her scarf around her, then opened the MG's door, which she had to hang on to, fearing that it would be swept back by the wind. Once she reached the carriage, she fumbled with the keyboard. Thankfully, did not have to resort to the good graces of Amos White. As she gained entry after only one false turn in the lock, as she pressed all her weight against the door to close it again, then secured it behind her. She let out a deep breath, glad that she was finally inside and out of the freezing winter weather. Nothing like the mashes to brittle your bones, Maggie said aloud as she pulled back her scarf, removed her hat, and looked around the dwelling for a moment. She was surprised, for the converted cottage did not resemble anything she had invest, investigate without taking off her coat. It was still far too cold. She used her scarf to wipe rain droplets for her hair and face as she walked around the room. In truth, she couldn't really remember what image came to mind when Georgina first mentioned that her brother lived in a converted railway carriage, but visually thought of prickly vermilion red wool fabric on set, dark wooden walls and doors with sign and read first class or third class. She had imagined the artist living in a glorified goods wagon, as opposed to the tasteful interior she now beheld. The sun was already going down, but Messi found matches next to an oil lamp on the sideboard, so removed the flue to light the wick. She was rewarded by the warming light as she replaced the column of glass and then a yellow globe shed that had been set alongside. That's better. Messi placed her document case on the table and walked around the main room. As neat as a pin, the room had been thoughtfully decorated. Donek had clearly retained the more attractive elements of a railway carriage design. The rich wooden bulkhead walls at either end had been stripped, varnished, and polished to a shine, as had the floorboards underfoot. Side walls had been painted in a pale cream distemper, and there were dark linen blind against windows that faced the sea. Two leather arm chairs, the sort one might find in the gentleman's club, were positions close to a wood burning stove set against the bulkhead. To the right of the front door, a stick of a dry driftwood had been placed on the side of the red tiled head, and on the other was a large kettle filled with water alongside several wide tools. A wood formed bed was set lengthways against the other bulkhead, the rich bungly counterpane hanging low over the side to mingle with the Persian carpet woven of what seemed to be very shade of red wool, from claret to vermilion, from maroon to a color that was almost burnt umber. Opposite the sideboard stood a dresser with upper cupboard and shelving for crockery, and an open space underneath where Nick Basington Hop had placed a set of jars and a bread bin with a heavy bread board placed on the floor working top to protect the dresser. Two more cupboards below held a frying pan, saucepan, and various dry goods and tins of soap. Turning around, Massey thought the compact room seemed to exude warmth, something she thought was probably essential to life on this part of at the cost, whatever the reason. Opening a second door, Massey found that the accommodations was not one carriage but two positioned parallel to one another. A house-sized door had been installed, which led to a small vestibule built to connect the two carriages. Windows on this long side of the carriage had been painted white, then decorated with a mural. Massey did not linger to consider the story depicted in the series of paintings, instead continuing her survey of Nick Bassington Hobbs' home. The vestibule gave way to the studio and bathroom, though there was no running water on plumbing for the resident of Dunghills. The bathroom consisted of a wooden washstand with a tile splashback and marble top. A jug and ewer were placed on top of the washstand, while underneath a chamber pot was covered with a plain white cloth. As he suspected that resident made a quick trip across the shingle to the water's edge each morning to empty the thunder pot. Upon investigation, a small wardrobe had held several items of clothing: three shirts, a pair of blue corduroy trousers, a brown woolen jacket, and another jacket of heavy waxed cotton. Reaching further into the depth of the wardrobe, she felt the rough texture of heavy wool and drew the sleeve of another garment towards her. Nick Bassington Hope had kept his army greatcoat, pulling the coat from the wardrobe. Massa lifted it out and instinctively held into her nose. Oh my God, I should never have done that. She had the coat at arm's length, then walked into the studio to take a closer look. Oh dear, there was still a speckle of mud across the hem of the coat. Then, as she pulled the fabric closer to the light, She noticed a broad agitated stain on the sleeve that she knew to be blood. May God he kept it all this time. Mercy closed her eyes and gripped the coat to her. The smell of death lingering among the folds of fabric, as if the garment had absorbed something of what the artist had seen as a young spolten. Amaisi returned the item of clothing in the wardrobe. Her hand lingered on the door handle for some seconds while she tried to extinguish the thought of Nick Bassington, hope and great God he could not part with. It was almost dusk now, and Mercy had barely dented the task she had set for herself this afternoon, having made a note to ask Georgina why Nick's clothing had not been taken from his home. She moved on. She had imagined an artist's place of work to be somewhat untidy, perhaps, with drawings here and there, pans whipping from unsealed pots, color smeared racks, books, and papers strewn across the floor. Looking at the clean, careful, tendon studio, Mercy realized that she probably held the same impression at Stratton of an artistic type at Monsing herself. She moved around the studio in which Nick Bassington Hope created the work for which he had been feted. On the wall that paralleled the first carriage, a special wooden case had been fitted to store the artist's pens. It reminded Massey of the mail slot at the block of flats that was now her home. Here each wooden pigeonhole had been allotted a certain color, and within held tubes and small pots of paint in many hues that could be described as blue, red, yellow, green, black, orange, and violet.